Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well. It's great to be with you again as we continue our Wayside School series. We're reading Wayside School is Falling Down, and we're at Chapter 6, called Pigtails. Hi, Leslie, said Paul. Hi, Paul, said Leslie. They were friends now. Paul hadn't pulled either one of her pigtails for a long time. Paul sat in the desk behind Leslie. Once, a long time ago, he had pulled Leslie's pigtails. It felt great. That is, Paul thought it felt great. Leslie didn't think it felt too good. But that was earlier in the year, when Paul was younger and immature. Now he knew better. Still, her long brown pigtails hung in front of his face all day, every day. The bell rang for recess. Leslie, said Paul, can I talk to you for a second? Sure, Paul, said Leslie. They were alone in the room. All the other children had rushed down the stairs, and Mrs. Jules had run to the teacher's lounge. I've been good, right? Asked Paul. I haven't pulled one of your pigtails in a long time, have I? So, what do you want, a medal? Asked Leslie. No, Paul chuckled. But can I ask you something? Sure, said Leslie. Paul took a deep breath. May I pull just one of your pigtails, please? No, said Leslie. Please, Paul begged. I won't pull it hard. No one will have to know. Please, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Please? You're sick, said Leslie. Paul lowered his head. I'm sorry. You're right. I don't know what came over me. I won't ask again. Good, said Leslie. She shook her head in disgust. Paul watched her pigtails waggle. Can I just touch one? He asked. I won't even pull it. I promise. What's wrong with just touching one? Yuck, you're gross, said Leslie, as she turned and marched out of the room. As Paul watched her go, her pigtails seemed to be waving goodbye to him. He slapped himself in the face with both hands. What's wrong with me? He wondered. He walked to the side of the room and leaned over the counter. He was stuck. He stuck his head out of the window to get some fresh air. Down below, he could see the kids playing on the playground. They looked like tiny little toys. Leslie stepped back into the classroom. I'm getting my hair trimmed tomorrow, she announced. If you want, I'll save the pieces for you. It'll be just some split ends. Paul was so excited he forgot where he was. He quickly raised his head and he bashed it against the window frame. Then he bounced forward and he toppled out the window. Leslie stared in horror at the open window, then rushed toward it. She leaned over the counter and she looked down. Help! Paul gasped. There was one brick on the side of the building that stuck out a little further than the others. Paul desperately held on to it with both hands. I'll go get Louis, said Leslie. He'll save you. No, don't go, cried Paul. I can't hold on. My fingers are slipping. Leslie reached down to him. Try to grab my hand, she said. Paul made a grab for it, but missed, then quickly clutched the brick back. I can't help. I'm scared. Just don't look down, said Leslie, as she tried to remain calm. She pulled her head back in through the window. Where are you going? Cried Paul. Don't leave me. Help. Leslie looked around Mrs. Jules' classroom for a rope, an extension cord, or something for Paul to grab onto, but she couldn't find anything. She returned to the window. She sighed, then leaned out backwards, her hands held tightly at the edge of the counter as she looked up at the sky. Grab my pigtails, she said. Then she winced. A big smile came across Paul's face. Really? He asked. Just do it, said Leslie. The pigtails hung about a foot above Paul's head. He let go of the brick with his right hand and grabbed her right pigtail. Ah! Leslie yelped. He grabbed her left pigtail with his left hand. Ah! Leslie screamed. Okay, pull me in, said Paul. His legs dangled beneath him. Leslie's eyes watered in pain as she tried to step away from the window. I can't. You're too heavy. Paul swung his legs up against the side of the building. Try now. Leslie groaned, then took a small step away from the window as Paul took a small step up the wall. Then they each took another small step. At last, Paul managed to get on one foot on top of the brick that had just jutted out. Leslie pulled her head inside the window as she took another step. Paul let go of the pigtail and grabbed the window sill. Leslie took another step, pulling Paul the rest of the way through. They both collapsed on the floor, tired and sore. "Ooh, my head hurts," said Leslie. "Wow, you saved my life," said Paul. "Well, don't worry. Someday I'll save yours." "You don't have to," said Leslie. "Just don't pull my pigtails any more." "I won't," said Paul. And suddenly he started to laugh. "What's so funny?" asked Leslie. "Well, I was just thinking, this time your pigtails pulled me." Chapter 7, Freedom. Myron crumbled a cracker on the windowsill next to his desk, then looked away. He knew oddly came only when no one was looking. A little while later, a bird landed on the windowsill and ate the crumbs. Myron watched him out of the corner of his eye. He was a blackbird with a pink chest. Myron had named him oddly. "Is that your dumb bird again?" asked Kathy. "No," said Myron. "Oddly's not my bird. I don't own him. He doesn't live in a cage. Oddly is free." "You're a bird brain," said Kathy. Myron watched Oddly fly away. It made him sad and glad at the same time. He wished he could fly across the sky with Oddly. "Oddly probably thinks I live in a cage," he realized. "Whenever he sees me, I'm sitting in this same desk. He probably thinks this desk is my cage." So Myron got out of his chair and sat on the floor. "Myron, what are you doing?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I want to sit on the floor," said Myron. Several of the kids in the classroom started to laugh. "Myron, get back to your seat," ordered Mrs. Jules. Myron reluctantly returned to his desk. "I do live in a cage," he thought. "I'm not allowed out. I have to stay in my cage until the bell rings. Then I have to go down the stairs. Then when it rings again, I have to go up the stairs. Then when it rings again, I have to go down the stairs. Then when it rings again, I have to go up to the stairs. I'm never free." The bell rang. Myron went down the stairs. It was so crowded with kids rushing to recess that he couldn't stop if he wanted to. It was as if someone had lifted his cage and was carrying him down the stairs. The bell rang again. Myron went up the stairs. At lunch, the bell rang again. Myron went down the stairs. After the lunch bell rang again, Myron stood at the bottom of the staircase and looked up. "No," he declared. "I won't go. I have to be free." As all the other kids rushed past him, he eased his way around the back of the stairs. As everybody went upstairs, Myron went down to the basement. He nervously walked down the old creaky staircase. He didn't know what he would find or what would find him. He had heard that rats were living down there, or worse, maybe even Mrs. Gorf. Mrs. Gorf was the meanest teacher Myron ever had. She used to be the teacher on the 30th story before Mrs. Jules took over, but nobody believed that Mrs. Gorf was really gone. Everyone said that she was still lurking somewhere inside Wayside School. He stepped off the last step at the very bottom of the Wayside School. It was too dark to see. Somewhere he heard a drip that echoed all around the cold and damp room. With his arms outstretched, he stepped across the gritty floor. His hand struck against a large, fat pipe above his head. The pipe felt like it was covered with thousands of spider webs. Still, Myron kept his finger on the pipe as he walked, so he wouldn't get lost. As long as he stayed with the pipe, he knew he would be able to find his way back to the stairs. Something crawled across his hand. He shook it off, and then he continued walking. He thought he heard footsteps behind him. He stopped walking. The sound of the footsteps continued for a second, then stopped. He started again, then stopped. The footsteps stopped a few seconds later. Myron wasn't alone. It was too dark for Myron to see who was following him, but he realized that meant the person couldn't see him either. Whoever was coming out after him had to have been following the pipe too. So Myron left the safety of the pipe and headed blindly across the basement. The footsteps continued behind him. He stopped. The footsteps stopped then. He bent down, then untied and took off his right shoe. He threw it toward the other side of the basement. He heard it hit the floor, then the footsteps started after it. Very quietly, he took off his other sneaker and threw it in the same direction. He never heard the other shoe hit the ground. The footsteps started after him again. He started to run, but slipped in his socked feet on the spot of slime on the floor. His hands hit loud and hard as he fell on the cold floor. The footsteps came hurriedly towards him. He held his breath and tried to be as quiet as possible. A light turned on above his head. "Ah!" Myron screamed. "I believe this is yours," said a bald man who was holding Myron's left sneaker. Next to him were two men with black mustaches. One of the men had held a black attaché case. Myron shook his head. "That's not my shoe. I never saw it before." The bald man glanced at Myron's shoeless feet. "What's your name?" asked the man with the attaché case. "Myron," said Myron. He regretted it as soon as he had said it. He wished he had made up a fake name. The man opened his attaché case and took out a note. "Myron," he repeated. He thumbed through the notebook. "You're supposed to be in Mrs. Jewell's class, at the desk next to the window in front of Sherry." "What are you doing out of your cage? What are you doing out of your seat?" asked the other man with the mustache. "I just wanted to be free," chirped Myron. "Please don't hurt me. If you let me go back to Mrs. Jewell's room, I'll never come down here again." "Well, do you want to be free, or do you want to be safe?" asked the bald man. "Huh?" asked Myron. "You can't have it both ways," said the bald man. "Do you want to be safe?" asked one of the men with the mustache. "Do you want to sit in the same chair every day and go up and down the stairs every time the bell rings?" "You'll have to go to school 5 days a week," said the other man with the mustache, "and you'll have to go to bed at the same time every day. But first you'll have to brush your teeth," said the other man with the mustache. "And you won't be allowed to watch TV until you've finished your homework," said the other man with the mustache. "You'll have to go inside when it rains," said the other man with the mustache. "But first you'll have to wipe your feet," said the other man with the mustache. "Or you can be free," said the bald man. The man took out a pencil and a piece of paper out of his attaché case. "So what do you want? Do you want to be safe, or do you want to be free, Myron?" Myron looked at the three men. "I want to be free," he said bravely. The man with the attaché case wrote something on the piece of paper and gave it to Myron. "Sign here," he said. Myron couldn't read the piece of paper. It was written in some kind of foreign language, but he signed his name. The man took the paper and pencil from Myron and put them back into his attaché case. "Okay, you're free," he said. "Good luck, Myron," said the bald man. "Here, I think you'll need this." He gave Myron his left sneaker, then reached up and pulled the chain, and the lights turned off. Myron found himself alone in the darkness. He put his shoe back on, then hopped across the basement floor. He had no idea how to get back. At last, his hand hit against a pipe, but he still didn't know which way to follow, left or right. He didn't even know if it was the right pipe. He turned and left and continued hopping, keeping his finger on the pipe. He was just about ready to turn around and try the other way when he nearly fell over the bottom stairs. He hopped up the stairs and continued hopping all the way 30 flights to Mrs. Jewell's classroom. Myron was tired. He was sore and dirty. "You're late, Myron," said Mrs. Jewell. "Go write your name under discipline, then return to your seat for your math test." But Myron didn't feel like taking a math test, and he definitely didn't want to write his name on the board. So he sat on the floor, and there was nothing Mrs. Jewell could do about it. He was free. After school, Mrs. Jewell found Myron's other sneaker in the teacher's lounge in the refrigerator. Have a great rest of the day. We'll talk again soon.